Hello, my loves. Welcome to another episode of the Becoming You podcast. Today, I am bringing an episode called 4 Things You Are Doing Backwards with Your Kids. I was having a conversation, with my child the other day. We were coming back from, some ice hockey game or whatever, because my whole life seems to be revolving around ice hockey lately. And, he had done something, he'd exhibited some amazing behavior in terms of starting to escalate to a fight with his brother. And then we kind of, validated why he might be picking that fight with his brother. And anyways, he just kind of de-escalated himself and stopped. And it was amazing to watch because with highly sensitive kids, usually when they start escalating, it is quite hard to help them regulate and de-escalate. And he had exhibited that behavior. And my husband and I, really told him and praised his efforts. We didn't focus so much on the fact that he had been picking on his brother for no reason. Instead, we really focused on, wow, we really saw that you listened and you took the right steps and you stopped. We can really see the progress and the effort that you are working on, regulating yourself. And at that point, I realized that in terms of how we parent and how we celebrate our kids, we have come a heck of a long way. And that's when this podcast idea occurred to me of, all the things that I used to get backwards with my kids when it came to parenting. And now, so I wanted to share the 4 things that you most likely are doing backwards and getting frustrated about why you're not seeing the results or the type of behavior you want from your kid. So here we go. Number 1, that you are most likely doing backwards is that you are probably criticizing them for every little thing that they are doing wrong or not getting quite right? You didn't put your homework away. You weren't on time. Come sit down for dinner. I've had to call you 3 times. You didn't pick up your Legos. You didn't empty the dishwasher. We're running late for school, right? We give them constant feedback in all the ways that they are falling short. And we only take the time to celebrate them for maybe 1 or 2 big wins during the day. We don't think to celebrate them for all the effort that they put in, most likely during the whole day. Or even if your child is putting in very little effort, I am really going to challenge you on looking for the wins. Now, this applies to you personally as well. How often do you spend time focusing on all the ways that you fall short in life? I was such an idiot then. Oh, I can't even get this right. Oh, I hate my body. Oh, I look like death, right? How often do we go down that kind of a critical conversation? And then how much time do you actually spend patting yourself on the back, right? How we parent our kids is always a reflection of how we tend to treat ourselves most of the time. So if you are someone who only tends to focus on where you're falling short and you're always driving yourself to do better by focusing on your weakness and your gaps, then you most likely tend to exhibit the same behavior when it comes to your kids and the lens through which you see them. And this is because, and I'm going to link the 4 things I'm going to be sharing today to what is the most likely emotional wound that this stems from and why is this so important that we change this habit, okay? So why change? So first of all, let's talk about the emotional wound. The emotional wound that it stems from of always being more critical and less, and it feeling really hard and awkward to celebrate not only yourself, but your kid, right? For putting the dinner plate away. And I know if you're anything like me, you're going to be probably internally rolling your eyes and being like, oh my gosh, I can't celebrate my kids for putting the darn plate in the sink after they've eaten at dinner, right? I expect that. That's the bare minimum they could do, right? And so we start to think all these bare minimums or basic standard expectations that we have for our kids, that is a must. And it's not worth celebrating, right? Like we don't even think it's worthy of celebrating. It's so damn basic. Like I shouldn't have to shout from the rooftop. I'm not asking you to shout from the rooftops, right? I'm not asking you to be over the top, but I am asking you to be conscious and let your kids know, hey, like I see the effort that you are putting in, right? Because we often just tend to celebrate them when they get great grades or, if they signed up for the talent show, we tend to celebrate them. Like we tend to focus on the big ta-das, right? But what I'm asking you to do is if you are someone whose child is consistently not enjoying math, right? And is refusing to do math homework, and then, you've been slowly working with them and now they are doing math homework with you without the resistance, that is progress worth celebrating. Don't wait to tell your child, well done, when they finally bring home a B or an A, right? On a test. Don't wait till then. I want you to find reasons to celebrate them every single day. And that is because the more, whatever you focus on grows, right? So if you're constantly focusing on where your child just is not doing things good enough, then you're going to be growing that, even though that's not what you want. If you're going to look for reasons to celebrate them and focus on what are they doing well, then they're going to be like, wow, mom and dad really noticed that I'm doing this well. Maybe I should keep doing that, right? What you focus on grows. The reason that you find this hard to do or find it awkward to do is one, you believe deep down, and no one will ever say this out loud. But if you are doing this, I promise you it is a symptom of the belief that who I am is not enough. Okay. I have to earn my worth. So that means I have to constantly focus on where I am falling short so that I can justify my worth. People don't think that I don't belong here, etc. It is a worthiness wound. It is a not enoughness wound. And if you are extremely self-critical, it doesn't even have to be extremely. If you are someone who tends to focus more on where you're falling short and have a really hard time celebrating yourself, it's because you don't think you're worth celebrating and your efforts are not worth noticing. And so that's the wound that you are now passing on to your kids by going through this, lack of celebration, overly focused on the criticism. And you might not even think of it as criticism. That's why this pattern is so hard to notice, right? I remember when I first started working with my first ever life coach, she started to bring to the surface my self-talk. And I didn't think anything was wrong with my self-talk at all. And I remember I resisted her for several sessions of where she would kindly try to show me and tell me, hey, Visa, the way you talk to yourself is actually part of the issue here. And internally, I would be like, what are you talking about? This is how everybody talks, or this is how I've always talked to myself. How can that be wrong? And I don't think it's really detrimental because this is how, my self-talk was so my internal monologue. I didn't even know that I could separate it from who I am and I could question that voice, right? So in the same way, the way you talk to yourself and the way you give feedback, you might look at it as I'm just giving feedback to my kids, right? When we are pointing out what you didn't put your clothes away, you didn't get in the shower fast enough. I've already asked you to do this 3 times, right? All the million and one things we tell our kids about how they're just failing our expectations every day. We just think of it as normal feedback. I'm just telling my kid what to do, right? And that's fine. But let's also find ridiculous number of ways to celebrate them, to build their confidence and to let them know, hey, I notice you. Who you are is already enough, right? Before we continue with the episode, a short message. Would you help someone even if the person you helped would never be able to thank you? Would you be willing to help someone even if you never knew the full impact you've had on their life as a result of your help? If so, then you're in the right place. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, insightful, or inspiring, I would love for you to share this episode with just one person. You will never know the full impact of this 30-second action that you take today by simply sharing. I'm on a mission to serve as many parents as possible to help them stop yelling at their kids and become calm, grounded, and patient so they can transform their family's relationship. And I can't do this without your help. So please hit the share button right now. And if you're the type of person who loves to help lots of people, I would love for you to share this on your socials or write a review for the podcast. But you do have to tag me at Life Coach Visa so I can send you a $5 Starbucks gift card. Now back to the episode. Okay, number 2. You expect them to trust you implicitly and overtly, right? You want your kids to do the things you ask them to do without any pushback or questions, without, there are things that you just want them to assume this is the way things are done. But you keep breaking your promises or your word to them all the time. And you don't even realize that you are breaking your promise or your word to them because you always have a good reason as to why you're doing it. So let me give you a really simple example of you might tell your kids, hey, if you get an A, right, in your math homework or whatever, I'm not saying you're doing this, but we're going to go out and do X, Y, and Z, right? And for whatever reason, when your child brings home that grade, you're not able to keep your promise. And you have really solid reason as to why you weren't able to do it, right? And you kick the can down the road, and then you kick the can down the road, and then you pretty soon forget about it, but your child does not. That's a way you've broken your word, right? And we do this in minuscule number of ways. One of the really strange ways this happens is when you give them threats or blackmail, right? Which is, I don't support that at all. And also that doesn't mean I judge you, right? If that's working for you, go for it. But it's saying things like, if I have to say it one more time, you're going to lose your iPad, right? And then you do say it one more time, and then they don't lose their iPad, right? Because you don't want to put up with the trouble of what are you going to do when you take their iPad away? So when you don't come through on consequences and you don't hold boundaries, that is you breaking your word. So if you keep showing them examples of where you're breaking your word, your bond to whatever it is that you have promised them, whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, and then you're asking your child to trust you implicitly, of course they're going to resist. Okay? Of course they're going to be like, well, you told me this last time and you didn't do it, right? Me and my husband often struggle with this one, right? Because we're so tired in the evenings. Sometimes my kid wants me to come hang out in his room in the evenings when he's showered, and then the bedtime routine starts to get long and I'm really tired, right? But there are 3 days of the week, and those are fixed days where we have agreed that either me or my husband will do this bedtime routine with him, and he has company. And on those days, it is the hardest thing because the dishes are piled up after dinner. I just want to get ready for bed and get into bed, right? Because I'm so tired, or I have work to do, whatever, right? My husband and I want to unwind and have time together. But it could be really hard to tell my son, you know what? I'm really tired. No, not going to do it today. And part of that is self-care, right? It's letting our kids know that sometimes I have to prioritize myself. That is not what I'm talking about. There are days where I told my son, you know what? I'm really, really tired. Do you mind? I ask him, or I get his consent for breaking that word, right? But 95% of the time, I make sure that we do not break that promise. With our kids, if we give them a consequence of we trust you not to do that, and if you do, There are certain things, or there are going to be certain consequences. So for instance, my son, without meaning to, damaged one of our doors inside the house permanently. And he knows that if anything gets damaged, both our kids know that if you're responsible for any kind of damage in the house, we're not going to be upset, right? Accidents happen, whatever. Like, we just expect you to put your pocket money towards replacing it, right? However long it takes to earn that money, like, it's going to come out of your money, or you're going to find a way to compensate us. And we do not relent on that, like, trust that we have. Yes, when I say trust, you could be like, well, it's not really fun for the kids. Trust doesn't have to be fun. Like, it's not fun for the kids to pay back for any damages that, might have occurred by accident, right? Like, I told you to not kick around the football. Now the TV's broken. Not that it happened in the house, by the way. But instead of getting mad about it, we're like, well, let's figure out a solution of how you're going to replace what has been broken, right? So there are ways, like, ask yourself, do my kids have reason to believe me and take me at my word, explicitly and implicitly? Do I behave in ways where I do not break promises and they don't have any reason to not trust me? Be radically honest with yourself. How often do you break promises? How often do you cave when it comes to consequences? How good are you about upholding boundaries with your kids? When you tell them, hey, like, this is the routine when you come home and it gets broken all the time, right? So if you want your kids to trust you implicitly, then stop giving them reasons to not trust you by breaking promises. Okay. Right. We didn't talk about, why the change for number 2, which is trust is a two-way street. Okay. If you want your child to listen and trust you, your word has to be absolutely solid. Absolutely solid for all the little things as well as the big things. Okay. Because think about how you build trust in somebody. You want somebody, a friend who says, if they're going to be there, they're going to be there. If they say, I have your back, they have your back, right? That's how trust is built. So where does this wound come from, right? Why are you not able to uphold boundaries? Why are you not able to go through on consequences? Why do you tend to cave? It's because there's a wound where it says, I can't trust myself. For whatever reason, there is a wound when it comes to self-trust, where you don't believe that you can stick to your boundaries. Okay? Like, you don't believe you can fully express yourself, where you don't believe you can take up space, where you don't feel comfortable with not being liked. A lot of reasons we don't uphold boundaries is because we don't trust ourselves to be able to handle the big feelings that come up with the discomfort of your child being upset with you, or you feel guilty for making your child suffer in a way, right? Of consequences, because when you implement consequences, they are suffering, they're whining about it, and you don't trust yourself to be able to handle their feelings as well as your feelings. You're like, oh my God, this is going to be so annoying. I don't trust myself to be able to handle the annoying feelings. So I'm just going to cave. That's where the wound comes from. Because you're scared that you won't be able to handle your own feelings. Right. Number 3, you rate your parenting based on their happiness level. Okay. When it should be based on how much emotional resilience you're helping them build. So the thing you have backwards here is, I rate myself on how good I am as a parent, the more happier my kids are. And happy with my kid being happy means, like, them never being upset, always going along with the decisions I make for them, never having to complain about anything, never having to be frustrated or disappointed or angry with me, right? That is something that I used to have backwards as well. Anytime my children were upset with me, I would start doubting about, oh my gosh, like I would start feeling guilty. And now instead I focus on, helping them build emotional resilience on myself as well as my kids. And what that means is you are helping them build the muscle to be able to handle the frustration, to be able to handle the disappointment, to be able to handle the anger that they're feeling towards me for making this decision, to be able to handle whatever struggles or challenges that they are facing in life instead of me swooping in to save them. Your savior quality that you have with your kids comes because you believe that your job is to never let your kids suffer in any way, shape, or form. This comes from the wound of it's my job to make everybody around me happy, because how much people like me is how much I am allowed to like myself. So essentially, it's a people-pleasing wound, right? You cannot stand the sight of your child suffering for any reason because you are the caregiver, you are the life giver for your child. So you believe your ultimate job is to never, ever let them suffer. It comes from the savior wound, okay? So why change this? Why stop focusing on how happy they are and why start focusing on how can I make them emotionally resilient? It's impossible to make your child happy, okay? Because happiness is an inside job. Happiness is an inside job. And happiness actually comes from having some level of discomfort in our lives, right? If you think about the happiest moments in your life, it probably was followed by some sort of struggle or challenge that you had. If you think about, I'm happiest when when my parents fly in from India or whatever, right? And I haven't seen a friend in a long time and I haven't seen some relatives in a long time and I see them, I'm super happy, right? That's come from a period of discomfort that you felt from yearning for them, from missing them, right? And you felt happy because you'd gone through that discomfort and they arrived at the airport and you saw them, and that pain and suffering that you went through of missing them was suddenly gone, right? So that happiness that you felt actually was followed by a period of discomfort. Anything that you have in life, right? Happiness from good health, right? That was usually followed by struggling with your health for a while. Okay. So saving your kids from any sort of struggle or challenge actually is doing them a really big disservice, because you're not allowing them to become emotionally resilient, which is part of the component of happiness and independence, right? And that wound comes from, as I've already said, is a belief of, I can only like myself if others like me or are happy with me all the time. How much others like me equals how much I can like. How much I can like myself. It's almost like a permission slip. All right. The final one, number four, what you have backwards with your child is that you want them to be independent, but you're doing everything to make them codependent. So even though you're telling yourself, I really want them to be capable, I want them to be independent, but your behavior and actions probably point to the fact that you're making them codependent. And that looks like making them ask for permission for things that they probably have the power to make their own decisions about. Taking away decision-making altogether and deciding things for them. Not setting them up for success through routines and structures. So they're having to rely on you to do a lot of routines and things. And then you punish them for making the wrong decision. Okay. So you make your kids codependent because it makes you feel needed or wanted when your kids want you for everything. And two, you have to give up control and allow your house to be some sort of a mess if you want your kids to become more independent, right? So that means having them, like when they come home from school, we immediately go into mom mode of like, have you put away a lunchbox? Have you put away your shoes? It's time to do your homework. It's time to get a snack, right? Like we're constantly telling them what to do next. And in a way that is wonderful and helpful because it shows our kids like we're paying attention and there's someone there taking care of them, right? But then you're also making them reliant on you because they're not having to think for themselves. They're not having to do anything independently. You get them the snack, you get them the water, right? You help clean up the table once they're done. And there is an invisible mental load that you carry as well, because yes, even though you might be giving them reminders and they're actually doing the tasks, you're still carrying a lot of the mental load, which is actually consumes energy. What if you set up routines and structures in place where maybe you have a list of or steps that they have to complete as soon as they come home from school? And in the beginning, when you set up this routine, a lot of things are going to get missed because they're not used to it. And so if you start getting annoyed when they're in that learning process and you're like, why aren't you getting this yet? We've gone through this so many times. That's what I'm talking about by you're punishing them for making mistakes, right? If you want them to become independent, capable humans, it starts today, not when they fly the coop and they go to college, right? How can you help them be successful in the mornings getting out the door? And work with your children based on their ages, right? Even children as young as 2 or 3 are capable of putting on their jackets, putting on their shoes, having their backpacks on, ready to go, without you running around like a mad woman trying to get it all done for them. This is how the Montessori method works. And it's just, it helps you in the long run. And the more we can allow our kids to, feel capable, the more independent they become. And part of learning to become independent comes from making mistakes. So if you have what should we say, kind of a stressful relationship with mistakes, like you don't handle your own mistakes very well, you have a hard time cleaning up other people's mistakes, you don't like letting go of control. These are all wounds, right, from which this stems. You don't like letting go of control. You like things a certain way at home. Everything has to be done in a certain way, right? And nobody can do it as well as you can. Nobody meets your expectations at home, and everything's like my God, like, why couldn't you even get this, right, or just this way? Those are all the wounds that lead to you inadvertently making your kids codependent on you, even though you consciously want your kids to be more independent and more helpful. You're not making strides in that direction. You're not actually setting them up for success. You're actually setting them up to rely more and more on you, but you also feel resentful that they're not more independent. And part of that reason is also when I say you punish them, what I mean by that is when they make mistakes, they don't follow the routine, you've tried for a couple of weeks and they haven't, the system hasn't worked for you. Instead of reviewing what's working, how can we change it to make it even more successful, you just pull the plug altogether and be like, it didn't work, whatever. We'll just go back to how it has always been and I'll do the bulk of the work, right? That's what I mean by healing your relationship with what it means to make mistakes. And part of this wound, it comes from perfectionism, right? You want things to be just a certain way. And it's really hard to let go of control. And you also, when you try new things and, you might set up systems and structures in place to help your kids, when they don't get it right away, you feel really impatient. And then that comes out with how you deal with it with your kids. All right. So let me know if this was helpful to you and which one of these, what I call backwards things, resonates the most with you. All right. I love you guys so much. Take care and I'll speak to you next week.